Welcome back, biologists, to another biology screencast. In this screencast, we'll begin chapter 5 and talk about energy flow and photosynthesis. In this chapter, we'll look at how algae can capture the energy in sunlight and convert it to food. Specifically, it'll take sunlight energy and produce oils that can be collected and be used as a fuel. This fuel is a greener alternative to fossil fuels. Algae technically are not plants. They're a type of simpler organisms called protists. Algae are known for their green, red, or brown hues. We believe that green algae are the ancestors of true and modern plants. As I mentioned before, algae can capture the energy in sunlight and convert it into forms that are more usable by themselves and other organisms. Much of the energy is converted into oils, and this oil can be collected and used as a fuel. The photo on the left shows a type of algae called dinoflagellates. When agitated, these algae can re-release some of that stored energy as light. The photo on the right shows what algae can look like under a microscope. Coal, oil, and natural gas are all known as fossil fuels. Fossil fuels form when ancient life and vegetation are subjected to heat and pressure for millions of years. As the world population continues to grow, the demand for oil and other fossil fuels will also continue to increase for at least the next 25 years. On top of that, sources of oil and other fossil fuels are finite or limited. They're known as non-renewable resources because it'll take millions of years to produce new supplies or replenish old supplies. Compare this with renewable resources like wind or sunlight. The map on this slide shows how a few countries in the world produce most of the world's oil supply. The United States only makes up about 4.25% of the world's population, but it uses more fossil fuels than any other country in the world. As a result, we're trying to find new sources of energy to reduce our demand on fossil fuels, especially imported fossil fuels, and also to lessen our environmental impact. The infographic on the slide shows how only about 9% of the energy that we use in the United States comes from renewable energy. The rest comes from fossil fuels and nuclear energy. Biofuels are an area of research in which scientists and engineers are looking into to find alternatives to fossil fuels. Biofuels are renewable fuels produced by living organisms like algae. In 2012, there were over 150 companies that were dedicated to making fuel from algae. The photo on the slide shows a car advertising how it runs on a biofuel produced from algae. Let's try to understand energy a little bit better. Energy is defined as the capacity to do work, and living things need energy to power many of the processes that happen within them. These processes include things like building complex molecules and moving substances across the cell membrane. Without a source of energy, all life on Earth would stop. That's why the ability to obtain and use energy is one of the characteristics of life. The diagram on this slide shows different forms of energy. You may remember kinetic and potential energy from your physics class. Nuclear, electric, magnetic, chemical, and thermal energies are different types of energy as well. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It merely changes form. We humans and other animals get our energy by eating food. Food contains a type of energy called chemical energy. Chemical energy is a type of potential or stored energy. The energy is stored in the bonds of biological molecules. When these bonds are broken, the energy is released and can be used to do work. Algae and plants don't have to eat food. They can make their own. And they make their own using energy from the sun. They'll trap sunlight energy and store it in organic molecules. That's how algae can produce biofuels that are high in chemical energy. This infographic shows how carbon dioxide, sunlight, and nutrients can be used to produce algae. The algae can then be harvested to produce fuels and to produce fuels. Okay. This infographic shows how carbon dioxide, sunlight, and nutrients can be used to produce algae. This algae can be harvested to produce fuels and also to fertilize fields, produce electricity, and feed animals. As I mentioned before, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. This idea is known as the conservation of energy. You can see this happening by observing a pendulum. The ball of a pendulum converts potential to kinetic energy as it moves, stops, and changes direction. 3 types of energy that are going to be important to our discussion of biology are chemical potential energy, kinetic energy, and heat. Chemical potential energy is stored energy in chemical bonds. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion or movement. And heat is a type of kinetic energy produced or generated by random movement and collision of molecules or atoms. This infographic shows how the body of a cyclist takes the chemical energy stored in an energy bar and converts it into kinetic energy to move his body and the bike, and also heat. Let's break it down step by step. In the first step, the cyclist takes in potential chemical energy in the form of an energy bar. In the second step, the body of the cyclist digests the bar. The chemical bonds in the bar are broken down, and the stored chemical energy is released. As the cyclist climbs a hill, the released potential energy is converted into kinetic energy and heat. Energy transformation is not 100% efficient. Every time energy changes from one form to another, some energy is lost as heat. That's why we need to keep supplying energy to any system like our bodies. Next, let's talk about how algae and plants capture sunlight energy using photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is defined as the process by which plants and other autotrophs use the energy of sunlight to make energy-rich molecules. This process requires carbon dioxide and water. The ultimate source of energy for photosynthesis is the sun. We use the term autotroph to refer to organisms that can make their own food. They'll do this by capturing and transforming the energy in sunlight using photosynthesis. Algae and plants are examples of autotrophs. Remember that auto means self and troph means food, so autotrophs make their own food. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, are organisms that have to obtain energy by eating other organisms. We humans and the lion in the photograph are examples of heterotrophs. Hetero means different, troph means food, so heterotrophs get their food from a source other than themselves. This infographic summarizes how there are 3 basic types of autotrophs: plants, algae, and some bacteria. It also summarizes how these organisms use sunlight to make their own food. Photosynthesis can be summarized by a simple chemical equation. In this chemical equation, sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide produce oxygen and a sugar called glucose. In algae and plants, photosynthesis takes place in very specific locations. These locations are the chloroplasts. Remember that chloroplasts are one of the organelles that can be found in cells. In this photograph taken with a microscope, you can see chloroplasts. They're the green blobs that are found in each algal cell. The easiest way to start thinking about photosynthesis is to break the word down into its two halves. Photosynthesis has a photo part and a synthesis part. Photo means light, and in the photo part of photosynthesis, light energy from the sun is captured and stored in chemical form. To synthesize means to create, and in the synthesis part of photosynthesis, chemical energy is used to generate molecules of glucose using carbon atoms from carbon dioxide. Light energy comes in many different forms. These include X-rays, ultraviolet light, visible light, infrared light, microwaves, and radio waves. All these different forms of light energy make up the electromagnetic spectrum. This diagram shows how the type of light energy depends on wavelength. The closer the waves are together, the more energy the light has. Light energy is made up of particles called photons. Photons are packets of light energy. Photons of different wavelengths contain different amounts of energy. Light energy is made up of particles called photons. Photons are packets of light energy. Photons of different wavelengths contain different amounts of energy. Blue and purple light, for example, have more energy than red or orange light because the waves in blue and purple light are closer together. A pigment is a colored chemical, and chlorophyll is a pigment found in the green parts of algae and plants. Chlorophyll in algae and plants can absorb photons of light energy. Chlorophyll absorbs red and blue light. It reflects green light. That's why plants appear green to our eyes. Plants don't actually use the green light. They reflect it.